So a very good afternoon to everyone that's in the lobby. Um, my name is George Cable. I am the marketing executive here at Adatus, and I'm really excited to be going live today with our second and final episode this week of our Power BI series. Today we are joined by our principal consultant in Power BI, Laz, who will do his formal introductions very soon. However, I would like to do some housekeeping just to make sure that everyone's aware of how this webinar will flow. So next slide, please, Laz. Fantastic. So this webinar will be recorded for the purposes of on demand. I can see that there's a lot of people here that I recognize from Tuesday's webinar. So you can also catch that one if you had missed it as well for all those that haven't seen it or would like to watch it again. I'll send out an email later on this afternoon with both links. So this one will be recorded as well for the purpose of on demand. All mics and cameras have been muted, just purely to avoid any disruptions throughout the content. However, we will be unmuting the mic at the end for Q&A to be enabled if you'd like to ask any personal questions to Laz. But please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat function throughout the entire webinar for any questions that you might have. In that case, then, I would like to pass over to Laz, who will be talking today about how to drive empowerment in organizations using Power BI Center of Excellence. So over to you, Laz. Thank you very much.
Cheers, George. Thanks. Okay, hi everyone. So yeah, just a bit of introductions to me as well. So I'm Laz. I am the principal Power BI consultant at Adatus. So for those who may not know as well, Adatus are a consultancy, right, that offers advanced analytics consulting. A bit more about me, I guess. So I've been now with Adatus for just over 3.5 years and have been working with Power BI for a fairly long time as well. And really, I spend most of my time on various different areas of Power BI, everyone. So whether that's helping to design and develop solutions that genuinely improve the decision-making process, running workshops to derive KPIs, writing DAX, optimizing models, and much more as well. But a lot of my time now goes as well on helping organizations in rolling out Power BI, right? And whilst doing that, also ensuring that they are aligned to best practice as well. And the content that we will be exploring in today's webinar ties into this, as we'll be exploring the Power BI Center of Excellence and how it helps empower users and drive change as well. So let's get into it, but let's first start off with the agenda for today's session, right? So first, we're just going to have a high-level overview, everyone, just so we're all aligned as well on what is a Power BI Center of Excellence, why do we really need it, and of course, let's go ahead and explore some of the benefits as well. Apart from that, we will then go ahead and explore a common question that is usually received around, well, when should the Center of Excellence be implemented, right? At what stage? When should we start thinking about it, and so on as well. Following that, we will spend majority of our time at looking at the various different factors that should be promoted and discussed within the Center of Excellence, and all, of course, influence or contribute towards empowering users and driving change as well. And lastly, I did want to add this, we will finish up with some pitfalls or challenges or things to be aware of when setting up a Power BI Center of Excellence in order to ensure that it is a success as well. Okay, so let's start off with what is a Center of Excellence, right? So the Power BI Center of Excellence, think of it as a function, right? Established for supporting the organization to leverage all the benefits that Power BI has to offer as well, right? So in other words, it ensures that the Power BI strategy, which was highlighted in the first part of the webinar as well, is being implemented through the relevant guardrails, the relevant best practices, the relevant governance as well, the relevant support structure, and not only for the self-service users, right, but also for the core reporting team in their Power BI delivery as well. So in other words, it creates an environment that is governed, but one that empowers users, right? We don't want to be restricting our users. Okay, so What are the benefits of a Power BI Center of Excellence? So as we can see, I did add a slide here, and some of the things on there are, for instance, the first is that the Center of Excellence increases the overall adoption of Power BI. It also offers the relevant guardrails, like we mentioned, to ensure that organizational policies are being followed, but at the same time without putting any major restrictions in place. So it's all about striking that balance, and we'll discuss that a bit later on. It also ensures a smoother transition into the self-service space, therefore assists us in that change that is necessary as well. And another one I added there, of course, it empowers our users by offering the relevant knowledge, the relevant training, and more importantly, the Power BI community that should be built and put in place as well, where it promotes everyone to ask questions, to answer questions, and have a go-to place in order to be able to understand what to do as well. Okay, so we now understand what a center of excellence is, and also we understand the benefits of having, or some of the benefits of having a center of excellence as well. So let's now look at the Power BI deployment approaches, right? That should be followed when rolling out Power BI, or a decision should have been made around these as well. And looking at these, we're then going to see, well, when should be the right time to implement or start initiating the center of excellence as well. Okay, but before we answer that, let's just have a quick overview so we all understand the deployment approaches, right? So the first one that you can see on the far left is corporate BI. This is where IT, or maybe just think of it as your core reporting team, right, have full control of both your Power BI data sets, so your models in other words, as well as your Power BI reports, right? So the business here are pure report consumers. Also, this phase here should be seen as setting the foundation or building the core. So the way I usually like to describe this, everyone, is see this as setting ourselves up to be in the best possible position to finally migrate or transition to that self-service space as well. That's how you should be thinking of the corporate BI phase. The second one, everyone, is managed-led self-service BI. And now this is where IT, or the core reporting team, starts to give some control back to the business, because they can now start to create their own Power BI reports. And this is where maybe the concept of Power BI champions will be introduced as well, which we'll discuss a tad later on in the webinar. Also, this is known as, and I always do share this, it's known as discipline at the core, flexibility at the edge. As I just said a moment ago with corporate BI, right? We set the foundation, we built the core, right? And now we're giving the business the flexibility to create their own reports as well. And lastly, we have business-led self-service BI. And essentially what this is, now the business not only can create their own reports, but can also create their own Power BI data sets as well, right? So there's a unique case to move here, but all in all, it is the third deployment approach as well. So just very quickly, from our experience working with different clients, when we go through sort of governance assessments and rollout assessments, it's not always the case that we simply start with corporate BI and then we move to managed-led self-service and possibly move to business-led. Every organization is on a different phase in this Power BI journey. There's different elements, there's different objectives, vision, pain points, and so on. So maybe sometimes it might be a case that we adopt more of a hybrid approach between these as well. However, in relation to the Center of Excellence, and going back to the initial question, when should we start the Center of Excellence? When would be a good time to initiate it? Well, ideally, we'd want to have started the process, ideally, before we move to managed-led self-service BI, right? Because as I said earlier on, having a Center of Excellence, one of the key benefits, it makes that transition into self-service a lot smoother as well. So that's where I would usually give as a recommendation for starting off the Power BI Center of Excellence. Okay. I had a quick look at what a Power BI Center of Excellence is, the benefits, when should we initiate one, but of course the title of the webinar is Driving Empowerment and Business Change with the COE. So we are going to review some of the factors now that are discussed as part of the Center of Excellence agenda, right? And that are relating to exactly that, empowering users and driving that necessary change in the organization. And as you can see from my slide, everyone, the first one is the Power BI framework. So in other words, how are we going to set up our Power BI workspaces, our apps, all the security, and how will this be maintained as well? So for those who may not know, just very quickly, think of workspaces and apps simply as folders for hosting your Power BI items, right? And putting the relevant thought into the framework creates an environment that not only supports the core reporting team, but the self-service users for hosting, publishing, sharing reports, and so on as well. So in other words, we should be aiming to create an environment that accommodates all our users' reporting needs. And the questions that we should be asking ourselves here when we're in the center of excellence are things like, well, how are the current workspaces or the current structure of the workspaces and apps set up, right? Do we have any new requests coming in from the business, which is a common thing? I need a new workspace. I need a new app. I need this person to have the ability to publish it, and so on. So in other words, should we maybe split workspaces up per project, per analysis, per report, per department? Other questions we'll be discussing and asking in here as well are things, well, should we maybe separate the workspaces for corporate BI versus self-service? Should we have a separate workspace only for Power BI data sets? Should everyone be allowed to publish to these workspaces? What type of security groups do we need as well? So all these are very common discussion points, usually raised in the center of excellence, especially when new requests are coming in. So again, it just allows us to create an environment, everyone, that allows all the users to take advantage of what Power BI has to offer. Okay, so that's the first one. Another factor that is common discussion, again, in the center of excellence, and certainly relates to empowering our users, is the semantic model. Now, so in regards to semantic model, this is a enterprise model that can be used for all Power BI report development, right? And the key benefit that this offers, well, it offers that single version of the truth, right? In other words, it offers everyone the ability to have the same numbers, to access it quickly and easily without us sending them on a fishing trip. And what will most likely be done is gathering various different ungoverned data sources, right? Now, even though the design and the build of the semantic layer, right, would have happened earlier on, so I'm not saying, in other words, that this is the first time we should have discussed establishing a semantic model, right? Any incoming requests of maybe adding additional data should be discussed and prioritized in the center of excellence, okay? And just some additional sort of recommendations on this as well. We usually recommend building our semantic layer through Power BI data sets, right? So essentially your Power BI data set, ingest the data, that's where your model will live. Or you could use something like Azure Analysis Services as well. And here at Adatis, what we do, we usually carry out something known as beam sessions, right? Which essentially allow us to understand what data is absolutely required in the end data model to satisfy all reporting needs based on existing business processes, right? So rather than just look at what we already have available in the underlying source, by creating this through extracting business processes, you can also maybe identify maybe some additional data that is required for reporting needs that is currently not available as well. Okay, another factor that is, again, common in the center of excellence is the discussion around data endorsements and also discoverability. So these are two features of Power BI. So endorsements, for those who may have not come across them before, they allow us to assign a label, right, of either certified or promoted as statuses to data sets, right? Whilst something like discoverability, everyone, what that does, well, it's a feature that allows us to democratize our data, therefore make it visible to the wider business as well. Now, these here certainly empower our users with the needed information to understand, well, which data sets can I use? And of these data sets, which ones have gone through various different checks, maybe by the core reporting team of high data integrity, are aligned to best practice as well, right? And again, this is a discussion point in regards in the center of excellence from the perspective of, well, what does certified mean, right? Or what does promoted mean? What's the definition of this? Should we assign a definition of these here? Who should be allowed to assign the certified or the promoted status against a data set? Or who should be allowed to maybe make a data set discoverable? And should it only be for certified, or should we also make promoted data sets discoverable as well? So again, these are the various discussions that we should be having here. And this certainly gives the information needed to the business in order to understand, well, what sources are the right sources to get the numbers that they need as well. Okay, so moving on to the next one. We have monitoring the audit logs and collecting feedback, right? So to understand if users are in fact using Power BI and taking advantage of the solution, we need to understand and monitor the adoption rate. So the more we understand, the more we know, well, what users may be missing. Maybe it's something that we disabled in the tenant settings, or we removed a feature. And the more we understand, the more we know what changes should be made to further promote the usage and adoption of Power BI, right? We need to have this information available to us in order to understand what change should be implemented in order to promote the usage of Power BI. So early on, we should have set up a monitoring and logging solution that is reviewed in the Center of Excellence, or assigned to someone, assigned to the people that are part of the Center of Excellence, and maybe some interesting findings are raised in the Center of Excellence, bi-weekly catch-ups, monthly catch-ups, and so on. And just to offer some more generic information here, or recommendations, I guess. So to extract this information, maybe we could approach it by using the Power BI activity log. So in other words, using the REST APIs, or maybe some PowerShell commandlets to extract this data out also. Lastly, another factor, very important, is the tenant settings in Power BI. So the tenant settings, everyone, you have to be a Power BI service administrator, firstly, to be able to access this, but they allow us to align our Power BI tenancy to our internal policy. So we can essentially configure things around sharing, exporting, and various different available features, both new and old as well. And doing this ensures that we're putting the relevant guardrails in place, right, for all users right from the beginning, and even maybe before we get to that self-service space as well. And for this, we certainly recommend that the Power BI Service Administrator should be involved, as well as a rep from the core reporting team, as well as members from governance and security, should all be involved in these discussions to understand, well, what should be disabled and enabled to the wider business. And of course, all these user groups or groups of people that I just mentioned here as well, ideally, they should already have a place in the Center of Excellence, right? And what I always like to say here, everyone, is all about finding a balance between empowering our users, right? At the end of the day, we don't want to start off Power BI or push them away from Power BI by really putting many restrictions in place, right? So it's about finding the balance between empowering our users, but at the same time, following those organizational policies as well. And what I always recommend is, at least on a 3-month basis, review this, because a lot of new tenant settings are coming into play and changing. So again, it should be logged, monitored, and reviewed every 3 months. Okay. Okay, so let's now view some additional factors all that drive, again, user empowerment, but also business change through the Power BI Center of Excellence. But what I'm going to do now, we're going to focus more on the people and the training side of things as well. So the first one is the Power BI champions. Now, I always like to say restricting our users from creating their own Power BI reports is not a long-term solution. In fact, doing this or maybe delaying it by too much, and of course, it depends on the organization, of course. But delaying this by too much as well, what it can actually cause is maybe users or people to start taking matters into their own hands. And by that, I mean, start collecting any data that they can find in order to create their own reports as well. And really, we have seen this before. This can be the start of maybe a departmental data silo as well. So for this reason, through the early discussions in the Center of Excellence, ideally, we should identify our Power BI champions, right? So in other words, the people who will be using Power BI from the business to create reports as well. And these individuals will also promote Power BI throughout the business and lead by example. So think of them as ambassadors for Power BI, right? Other people will see what they're doing, and ideally we want to create a sort of buzz where other people would also want to gain the status of Power BI champion as well. Now, a common question I usually get here as well are, well, who are good candidates for this, right? Well, think about maybe those users who have been submitting tickets very early on since introducing Power BI into the business. Think of those people who are probably approaching you directly or have been approaching maybe the core reporting team directly, Teams messaging, emailing, calling, etc. Or even when we are first implementing Power BI, if we have any reports, think about that corporate BI phase, right? Very early on, look at the audit logs or the report audit metrics. If we find users there with very high user counts or views for this report, all these people here are what we like to call early adopters, and these are really good people to try and bring on board as Power BI champions because they have that natural curiosity, that natural passion, and that will spread over to other people as well. Okay. We then have a very important factor to drive certainly user empowerment and business change. And that there, everyone, is the internal portal. So one of the core tasks of a Power BI Center of Excellence is to establish, maintain, and continuously monitor the internal portal. So it's recommended to create an internal portal and think of it as a place to form the heart of Power BI or the Power BI community, right? And we should always promote this as the starting environment for all Power BI users as well, right? All this, if someone was starting new with Power BI or have questions, we should really direct them here. So if we have someone asking us a question directly, we should ask them, hey, please go ahead, post your question in the internal portal. This is where you can find the internal portal as well. Tag me, tag my team. We're only doing this because we know this is a really good question. Someone else will want to ask it. We're trying to create the community. We want to keep it as interactive as possible. We'll be sure to get back to you, right? And again, that way we keep a level of activeness in the community. And that's exactly why we should be promoting it as the starting point as well. But again, some other things to keep in mind with the internal portal, everyone. Why? Why should we do this? Well, firstly, we're creating a space where everyone can ask questions, super important. But also we're creating a space where not only everyone can ask questions, right? They can also answer questions as well. And don't get me wrong, this won't be the case very early on, right? Very early on, it will most likely be just a core reporting team being the team that will be answering people's questions. But the more we progress, the more it matures, other champions or maybe other users will feel more confident in picking up and answering people's questions as well. Apart from that, all users feel empowered when we have a portal in place because it helps them align to best practice, right? Through things like giving them the relevant information, checklists, starter templates, and so on. And we're going to discuss that a bit later, a bit afterwards as well. And I always like to say the Power BI, the portal, the community, it creates a level of excitement, motivation around the technology, therefore promotes further change. Now, another common question I usually get here as well is, well, where should we go ahead and establish such a community, right? I always like to say, and what we usually do, we do use something like maybe SharePoint site or maybe Teams in the past, but I always say where or what collaboration or communication platform is currently most used by users in the organization. That's ideally where we should build the community, right? We're asking users to start using a new platform tool, which is Power BI. So it's a lot more difficult to add a second new collaboration and sharing collaboration and communication platform in the middle. So whichever platform they're already using to communicate, collaborate, that should be where we set up the Power BI portal as well. Okay. Another factor is Power BI training. Yeah. And training, as we can imagine, ensures we empower the users with the relevant knowledge that they need to use Power BI. So moving to a new tool, everyone, can certainly be a scary process. I'm sure we've all been there ourselves. So if someone has been using the same thing or doing the same thing for the last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, again, it can be a scary thing to move away from it as well. So from our experience, if we don't offer the relevant training, people simply won't use it. Now, All Power BI training, I guess, as you can see from the slide, is done in Power BI, is split by Power BI personas, right? And the training should ideally be directed to the Power BI Center of Excellence and discussed in there as well. Furthermore, as a Center of Excellence will have a good understanding, or they should have a good understanding of all other incoming requests, discussions with champions, right? Because the champion should be involved in the Center of Excellence as well, and looking at maybe auditing logs, they too should also understand if any training is required as well. And like I said, the way we approach training in Adatis is we like to split it up by Power BI personas. So these personas are the 4 personas that are required in order to make a Power BI ecosystem work successfully. So we split up into report consumer training, report author training, data designer training, and then Power BI administrator training as well. And the reason we do this, everyone, what we find is, well, we find it that it could be very overwhelming if we have, maybe think of it as a report consumer, someone from the business. All they really care about is consuming reports. So if we put them on a training session where they are now learning how to align your data model to a star schema, or how to optimize your DAX for best performance, you can imagine this would demotivate them, because it has nothing to do with what they do on a day-to-day basis, or what the vision is of how to use Power BI as well. And for that reason, we like to split it up. That way, the different personas attending the training are only receiving information that is relevant and useful to them as well, right? And this is usually classroom-based training. But with that, there are some additional ways that should be set up and should be discussed in the Center of Excellence as well. So some successful things that we have done in the past and continuously do now: we set up lunch and learns, right? We do drop-in clinics, maybe every other Friday for 2 hours, 3 hours, etc. is always different. And maybe sharing some external Power BI events, such as Power BI user groups, which are very popular across the country as well. Another factor to keep in mind is communication and events. So this here may seem like it overlaps a little bit with training, and I guess it does to a certain extent. However, the aim here is to have a consistent communication stream. That's the point I'm pointing out here. So to promote change, we need to offer knowledge and create desire, right? Which we do through training, right? But also we need to create awareness and consistently do this as well. So the Center of Excellence should promote and monitor that this is a continuous thing, right? So people from the COE, they can be nominated, or someone from their team can be nominated, or someone from their own team can be nominated as well. So think of this as things such as maybe running a monthly presentation on an interesting or maybe a new feature that Power BI has to offer, or maybe a new solution that has been built in the organization, that has been developed, anything that showcases how Power BI has been used and benefited the organization. Also think of things maybe like Power BI newsletters. So here maybe summarize some of the new and the relevant features, maybe something new and planned on the public roadmap in order to create some excitement. Maybe we knew this feature was very much required by the business. So again, put this in the newsletter, or even maybe have a short message from the executive sponsor, which is super important, and we will be discussing shortly as well. So these are the sort of things that we should be doing in order to make sure that there is a consistent communication going out to the business. And this aspect of consistency, by the way, is so important when it comes to the Center of Excellence, and even ties back to other things such as your internal portal, right? It's not about just setting it up first time, answering a few questions and then pausing there. It needs to be a continuous, a consistent process where we review this and we stay up to date with them as well. Okay, lastly, another factor that is discussed and promoted in the Center of Excellence is best practice, right? So again, what do we mean by best practice? Already mentioned this throughout the presentation, the webinar, right? But the COE should implement various different things, such as maybe report templates, right? So by report templates, think of these as starter templates. So it's just a Power BI file. Maybe we add the relevant background images in there. Maybe we align it to the organizational branding, guidelines, etc. And that way we just give some level of consistency and a starting point for all our users as well. Some additional things that can be discussed and put together are things like go live checklists, right? So in other words, if you're a member from the core delivery team and you click publish, a message will pop up and say, hey, have you gone through this checklist? It'll be very valuable to ensure that your solution is scalable, performant, etc. Or if you're someone from the self-service side, maybe a champion, you have the same level of experience and the same type of checklist offered to you as well. Another one that we usually do is short how-to videos, right? That showcase some of the key features and how they should be used in order to best work with Power BI, right? And again, one thing that really should be pointed out here, everyone, is the fact that everything I just mentioned here should be taken and hosted in the internal portal as well. So you can see how a lot of things tie back to the internal portal. As we said, that should be the starting point, the go-to place for Power BI. So adding this type of information, this type of documentation there really does empower our users and help them to transition from maybe anything that they were using before into Power BI as well. Okay, so we got an understanding of the center of excellence and the benefits. We understood the 3 deployment approaches and also maybe where to initiate the center of excellence. And we saw some ways in which the COE can drive user empowerment and drive business change as well. Now, from our experience, I'm going to show you some of the common challenges or pitfalls, as I call them, of creating a center of excellence and how important these are to ensuring that a successful COE is functioning as well. So the first one that you can all see on the slide is exec sponsorship, right? So I would say this is one of the most important things that must be in place as well. So if we do not have an exec sponsor, what I used to find, not even now, but even before when I was more of an in-house developer promoting a tool such as Power BI as well, people who were expected to attend the Center of Excellence and the meetings, whether they're bi-weekly or monthly, well, they were too busy with other priorities. Or people who maybe were expected to go and ask all the questions in a portal, well, instead, they'll simply just come back to your desk, pick up the phone or Teams message you and so on as well. And why was this happening? Well, the business was seeing the task of establishing a center of excellence and all the things involved with a center of excellence as simply as a IT task or a core reporting team task, right? So it wasn't a priority that was coming from a top-down approach. So the business interpreted it as just it's an IT objective, not a business objective. So that's why it's so important to have the involvement of that individual that is more influential in the organization. Doesn't have to be a C-level, doesn't have to be a director. It just has to be someone with a bit more influence. And by this, I also don't mean that they don't have to be a person that attends the Center of Excellence meetings on a bi-weekly basis, right? But maybe to drop in once in a while to send out an email highlighting the work that is being done, or maybe in any newsletters, like I mentioned earlier on, we reserve them a place every 3 months where they can write a short paragraph on why this is required by the business and not only by IT. And these are the benefits that we're gaining from it as well. Okay, another challenge to be aware of is the agenda, right? I see this time and time again, not having a strong agenda and a designated person to run the Center of Excellence bi-weekly catch-up. So we want to make sure once we have everyone in the Center of Excellence meetings, there is a clear goal and a direction that we're moving, that we're all moving towards together. In other words, if everyone feels like there is no real use case, right, or the person who is running the meeting hasn't got a direction to go towards, well, everyone starts to get demotivated as well. So we should also have a strong agenda and things that we usually promote to have on here. Again, it depends on what stage you are in your Center of Excellence, your objectives and so on as well. Maybe any key requests raised by users. For example, as I mentioned earlier on, where we need a new workspace, that should be directed to the Power BI Center of Excellence. Maybe things like monitoring usage of Power BI. So again, key insights, findings found through the audit logs, arrange required training, decide maybe on whether something that should be transferred from the business to the core reporting team. So maybe the business created a report, it's picked up a lot of popularity. Can we move it over to the business side, and various other things as well? But again, fundamentally, having someone designated to run these meetings, they can be changing over, of course, to someone else, and a strong agenda against it as well. Okay. Lastly, another pitfall is not having the relevant people as well with the right skills. So ideally, the Center of Excellence, everyone, again, it should discuss topics like I mentioned throughout: governance, best practice, even architecture, data visualization, various other topics as well, all relating to Power BI, governance, putting the relevant guardrails in place. Therefore, we should have a rep from, as you can imagine, maybe from engineering, from governance, from report development, and so on. However, one additional person or user group that we should always have involved are the Power BI champions, right? And they are the individuals that understand or truly understand the pain points of the organization as they work in the organization, right? So they have the insight to give the Center of Excellence to understand what needs to be done differently in order to promote the usage of Power BI, to feel users feel more empowered, and also the changes that should be implemented as well. And this is why I always like to say as well that the Center of Excellence should be led by your core reporting team or IT or data, but with the focus on the business as well, right? And again, this will just ensure that all decisions in the COE do promote positive change and drive user empowerment. Okay. So just to finish up, everyone, I'd like to share how a Datis as well can help you when rolling out something like Power BI or setting up a center of excellence regarding the structure, who should be involved, the agenda, the things that should be discussed in there. So we offer a 4-phase engagement. And just to quickly walk you all through this as well, I guess the first one is the planning phase, right? And as you can imagine, over here is where we align on the current objectives, the vision, what are the pain points, what are the different categories of Power BI that we should explore together, who are the different stakeholder groups we should have catch-ups with in order to actually understand what is currently going on as well. And then, of course, we move on to the current state. And as the name suggests, and as I just said a moment ago, we have various meetings to understand the current, the as is, right? So we have discussions around governance and security, around data platform, data integrity, reporting, team structures, issues, in-flight projects, and vision of Power BI as well. We then, of course, move to the third phase. And this here, everyone, is where we write a set of bespoke recommendations in regards to all the things that should be in place for you to initiate, roll out, or promote Power BI in a successful way as well. And then lastly, we have a roadmap phase. And this here, of course, takes all the recommendations, right, and puts them in a sequential order of when and how they should be implemented as well. So hopefully that there also gives you a bit more information in regards to our 4-phase approach when it comes to helping organizations implement governance around Power BI. So with that said, everyone, I hope you found that session insightful, and I'll be happy to take any questions as well.
That's great, Laz. So I have unmuted people's mics. So if you'd like to ask a question to Laz, feel free to unmute yourself. If not, please feel free to use the chat function. That was a great session, Laz. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
We shall just give it a minute or so. There might not be any questions, and you might have wrapped up everything perfectly, Laz.
Sounds good. But of course, if anyone does have any questions as well afterwards, yeah, as always, do feel free to reach out as well. So always be happy to, yeah, pick up anything afterwards.
We do have a question.
Oh, here we are. We have
Carol.
Carol, yep, I saw that. So do you have any thoughts on size of champion group as a percentage of a company? I guess really, Carol, it depends on what stage you are as well in regards to your Power BI rollout. As I mentioned earlier on, we have those 3 Power BI deployment approaches. So you start off with corporate BI, you then move to sort of managed-led self-service, and that's when we need to start thinking about, well, hey, now we need our champions because we're moving to that space where we want people from the business to start creating their own reports. But then again, in regards to how many Power BI champions should we have? Again, it depends. It depends on things such as maybe, well, how heavy is the load on the core reporting team? Is the core reporting team being flooded with so many requests from the business right now that they can't handle it themselves? Or maybe do we have an individual department that that has a sort of high understanding in Power BI, so they've been using it for a longer period of time, right? So in other words, it depends on various factors on how many Power BI champions we should have in. Ideally, it should be maybe more of a phased approach to some extent in order to understand if there's any core challenges. That way we can fix it before moving to the other phase. But what I always like to say sometimes is let's try and have a champion for each of the departments, again, depending on the size of the departments or each of the teams as well. But it's hard to give a percentage, to be honest. It depends on so many factors. I can see another one from Ben. No question from me. Thought that. Oh, thank you, Ben.
Amazing.
Yep, absolutely, Brian. Kevin, you answered the oh, great.
Amazing. Amazing stuff.
Perfect.
If there's any more, okay, so we've got one from Cheryl.
There we are. Cheryl, what are the minimum or required continuing trainings for Power BI champions given the rapid development of Power BI? That's a very good question. So again, it all goes back, Cheryl. So initially, what I always like to say is let's put some formalized training for our Power BI champions in place, right? Now, of course, it's the case where we might be getting more and more and more champions coming in as well, Cheryl, right? So maybe it might be the case where we do something along the lines of train the trainer. So train people inside the organization. That way, when we do get more people picking up the status of Power BI champion, because ideally that's what we do want, we have a established team internally that has the knowledge, the process, the documentation to be able to redo the same training sessions as well. Now, in regards to Power BI changing frequently, and you're right, what we like to do here is it goes back to what I said before: the lunch and learns, the drop-in clinics, the Power BI portal, right? Maybe for the Power BI portal as well, Cheryl. Again, it depends. Have done this previously for one client. Maybe you can dedicate a place in there for Power BI champions, right? So in other words, it makes it a bit more, it might drive other people to also want to become Power BI champions, but what we can add in there is maybe a bit more technical things or things that might be more relating to what they do as well. But it's just about keeping that level of consistency with your lunch and learns, your drop-in clinics, the COE promoting continuous communication to be going out, monthly presentations, training, and so on as well. So hopefully that answers the question, Cheryl.
Fantastic. If there's any more questions, amazing. Yes, lovely. Cheers, Cheryl. We'll wrap it up there then. Oh no, we have another question.
Yep. Any advice on how to maintain high quality of certified/promoted datasets without discouraging users? Any advice on how to maintain high quality certified promoted dates without discouraging users? If I understood that correct, Lucas, and feel free to unmute yourself. Is it how we just implement high quality data sets? Is that correct?
Yeah. So basically, my question will be: we of course want the users to create the data set themselves and basically derive this from their level. But at the same time, we want to make sure that everything that is being created is to high standards. So, for example, if in like 1 year time it's still gonna be performant. So at some point you mentioned star schema, etc. So we just want to have this, but at the same time we do not want to go back to the user and ask them, actually it's not the best, could you do that and this, you know.
Yeah, no, and thanks for clarifying that as well. No, I definitely understand now. So you're referring more when we go to that sort of business-led approach, really, right? Where people maybe from the business can create their own data set. So how do we enforce that they are of a high standard, essentially? Yeah. So I guess, again, through that, I guess the first thing I always like to say at this point is when we do get to that phase, right, maybe that's the phase that maybe that is the approach that we're using throughout the organization. Maybe it's more concentrated in a specific area of the organization as well. But sometimes if we have a core reporting team, Lukasz, as well, and then we have a self-service users creating their own data sets, well, firstly, before we even, how do we promote them from creating data sets for high standards? That way other users don't create maybe reports based off these data sets. Maybe we can separate corporate data sets from self-service data sets. Yep. So keep those two things separate. Maybe have the corporate data sets with the certified status, and then maybe have these data sets with the promoted status instead as well, right? So again, that's not really showing them how to do it, but that's us putting the relevant guardrails in place. That way, if other users around the organization use that, they understand that they're using one that was built from the business and not the core reporting team. Now, to directly answer your question as well, think of things like I mentioned on the Power BI portal, right? Again, as I said to Cheryl, maybe you have a designated place for the Power BI champions. In there, you should only give them information that is relevant to them. For example, one thing I've done for other clients as well is for the champions, we've created go live checklists. So in other words, before they publish a data set that can be used by the wider business, please can you review these 30 questions with an answer and what you should do in order to make your solution scalable for the future, performant, and aligned to best practice as well. So that's another thing you could possibly do there as a quick win. Have a Power BI checklist, go live checklist. Yep.
That sounds great. Cheers. Thank you.
Yep. And I can see another one come in. Where would you, from William, where would you suggest building a Power BI portal? Where would SharePoint or Teams be suitable, or is it something built in the Power BI browser version? So good question, William. So this one I highlighted briefly in the webinar as well. Again, we do use something like SharePoint, right? But again, always, where is your current collaboration communication platform? Build it there, right? It's a lot more difficult to get people to access or to start using Power BI by telling them, hey, go to this new communication or new platform to learn how to use Power BI. So if it's SharePoint, use SharePoint. If it's Teams, use Teams. If it's anything else, use that. That's the best thing I always suggest.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think that might have been the last question.
Great.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today. We really appreciate your time as well. We'll be sending out an email shortly for the on-demand links and all the slides that have been presented today. You can also tune in to our first webinar hosted on Tuesday on demand as well. So again, we thank you for your time and look forward to seeing you again in the future for more webinars, hopefully.
Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.